I'm joined today by Stephen Mansfield, who's the author of The Miracle of the Kurds, a remarkable story of hope reborn in northern Iraq. And I think a great place to start, Stephen, is your book focuses on northern Iraq, but it would be important, I think, for the audience to understand the Kurds as a group beyond just Iraq. So let's start there. Who are the Kurds?
Well, it's probably most important to know that the Kurds are a non-Arab people who consider themselves the descendants of the ancient Medes. People probably know this term best from their Bibles, the laws of the Medes and the Persians that we read about in the Old Testament. And they are a unique people in the Middle East, having lived largely in the mountains. Those who dislike them called them the hillbillies of the Middle East, but they're far more progressive than that. They have a strong sense of tradition, a strong sense of belonging, a strong sense of culture, and their graciousness, their hospitality, combined with their warrior code, their sort of poet warriors, some have said, makes them distinct in the Middle East. I think it's also important for people to know that they have been mistreated time and again, though they are certainly large enough to warrant their own homeland. Their region up in the north around the Zagros Mountains, overlaying parts of Turkey, parts of Iran, parts of Syria, and of course Iraq. Has not been, the boundaries have not been drawn in all of the treaties of Europe after World War I and in more recent times, so they could have their own homeland. So they've ended up being a minority people amongst many of the nations in the Middle East, and that, of course, is their historic complaint. What's brought them to international attention in recent decades, of course, is Saddam's atrocities against them.
So we have this group that is largely, it's correct to say it's mostly a Sunni Muslim group, correct?
That's correct.
We have this group that has, they're predominantly living in specific areas of a variety of countries, as you've mentioned. One of the most interesting things to me about the Kurds is if we go back to the Ottoman Empire, right? We have these circumstances where in a lot of the recent conversations on corporate media, including the kind of kerfuffle on the Bill Maher program, one of the things that I think was missing from the analyses that was being made by everybody was that before the Ottoman Empire, pre-dissolution of the Ottoman Empire, the Muslim people were much more united as a people, so to speak, and that now you see very significant differences between Muslims in different parts of that part of the world. Something similar has happened with the Kurds, has it not, where they're no longer, even though they all, I guess we could say, share this general desire for a land that is their own, they are not really a unified group in any sense of the word.
Well, the Kurds do have their divisions. They've had an embarrassing civil war right at a time they might have been taking their control of their own destiny into their hands, just after the no-fly zone in the early 90s. And of course, what really has caused them grief in recent years is that so much of what they have suffered, even during the Saddam years, was a result of mistreatment by their Islamic brothers. So I sat with the senior mullah of Kurdistan not too long ago, and he told me that he had no intention of letting the more extremist kind of Islam that had done them damage for so many years into his region. The Kurds are very moderate. They have women on their Supreme Court. They have women commanding Peshmerga troops, female entrepreneurs. There's a Christian department in the KRG, the Kurdish regional government. So they actually have a government devoted to Christians, devoted to Yazidis. They're very moderate, very open to other religious expressions, but you're absolutely right. They're suspicious of the surrounding Islamic world because that world has conspired against them so much in recent decades.
Can you talk to us a little bit, Stephen, about, I think one of the most important things right now, because of all of the misinformation that is often spread about the so-called inherent violence of any population that is Muslim, I want to talk a little bit about the Kurds in that context so we can not kind of caricature them or lump them in with any group they don't deserve to be. In my research, I came across what I would call numerous individual or anecdotal instances, stories of kidnappings by Kurds, violence against Christian minorities by Kurds, etc. Contextualize it for us in terms of can we look at these incidents as isolated in some way, and if so, why? Or what does it really tell us about the Kurds?
Well, anyone who's making the case that the Kurds are an angelic people are making a foolish case. This is a people group of as many as 30 million people. Will there be crimes? Will there be religious bigotry? Will there be violence? Of course there will. On the whole, though, what's appealing about the Kurds is their moderation, are the few, very, very few killings that took place once they had their affairs in their own hands and they were protected from Saddam. I would never try to make the case that there are people, free of violence, free of religious bigotry. In fact, one of the things I put in my book that concerns me is that they share with the rest of the Muslim world in the Middle East portion of the Muslim world anyway, a rise in honor killings, particularly in the rural areas. You have, women who will go to the cities, go to universities, learn sort of Western ways or looser ways than perhaps their rural context would want religiously. And there are honor killings, so to speak. Of course, I would consider them dishonor killings, but you understand that's the term that's used.
Yeah.
And so this concerns me greatly. So it's wise that we set this in context. No one is saying that the Kurds are without some of the violence, some of the persecution. I've had Christian friends assassinated in Kurdish cities. The difference, perhaps, is that the Kurdish government came to those of us and apologized and said this is rare. And statistically, it was rare. So you do have a more moderate, slightly more peaceful people than you do in the surrounding area. But again, no one's claiming that they're angels, and they're subject to the same religious extremism as other peoples.
With regard to the current battle against ISIS and the possibilities of any kind of alliance between the U.S. and the Kurds, how do you see the Kurds fitting into this current incursion that involves ISIS?
Well, the Kurds are the most effective fighting force on the ground against ISIS. What's amazing about them, in my view, is that they still see themselves as a U.S. ally, despite the fact that the U.S. government has betrayed them time and again. In fact, one of the worst gassings in human history happened in 1988 in a city called Halabja, and some of the gas that fell on Halabja was sold by U.S. companies to Saddam. Time and again, there have been betrayals. And yet the Kurds see themselves as U.S. allies. So they're willing to fight ISIS. They want to fight ISIS. They understand the threat of ISIS. What they need is arms from the West, particularly the U.S., and close air support. But they're very, very effective fighters. They've proven this time and again. They have a a very strong martial tradition that goes back pre-Ottoman times, and then certainly was enhanced during the Ottoman times. They teach their young from the very beginning to fight, to shoot on one foot and then shoot on the other to develop balance and good targeting.
And what's interesting about that to me, Stephen, not to interrupt, is that in many other contexts, hearing about a group that teaches their children how to fight would be seen as an incredibly negative and concerning thing, right? In other words, in the absence of a strategic, specific that would make that an advantage, we would say, we should be horrified that there's a group that is teaching its children how to shoot guns standing on one foot. And this is what concerns me, because time and time again, we've seen the U.S. arm groups that then we eventually end up fighting against our own weapons, right? And so what can you tell us about how this situation, if you believe it would be different, why would it be different than those countless situations the U.S. gets itself into?
Well, I certainly understand your concern, and I wouldn't lay it aside at all. I think it's valid. The difference perhaps with the Kurds is they've proven themselves time and again. They are not invading other nations. They have never misused what material was given to them. They have no designs, no imperial designs. They have, I guess the best way to say it is they've proven themselves again and again. Now, whenever you arm a people, you take a risk. There's no question that you may see those weapons in another context. We've certainly seen that in Afghanistan. We've seen it elsewhere. But if there are any people on the earth that, in my view, have proven themselves time and again capable of restraint, capable of using the weapons for the purposes for which they were given, it's the Kurds. And that we're talking about decades now. That they have been a people who, though they maintain a martial culture, it's not too unlike, a father in Alabama teaching his sons to hunt. I mean, it's approximately at that level. We're not talking about militias here for 16-year-olds or 14-year-olds. But nevertheless, yes, it's something we would need to watch. But I'm not sure we have any other options right now. We don't want to put U.S. boots on the ground against ISIS. ISIS is only about 30,000 warriors. The Kurds, the Peshmerga, are 80 to 100,000. They just need arms. They need strategy. They need close support. And I think that we can defeat ISIS. So we'll have to take that risk, I think, because I'm not sure we have any other options. And they're the best investment that I can see in the region.
All right. Very, very interesting. And the book is fascinating. To remind everybody, we've been speaking with Stephen Mansfield, and the book is The Miracle of the Kurds, a remarkable story of hope reborn in northern Iraq. Stephen, really a pleasure having you on. Thank you.
Great to be with you, David.